on yitsalemons.com. Hello and welcome to another fantastic episode of Smash TV. But before we start with the goodness, a word from our sponsor. Do you feel bored? Is your internet broken? Do you have an urge to be artistic? Do you want more color in your life? Why don't you get one of these nifty coloring boards based on your favorite YouTubers? Print them out, color them, and hang them on your wall. It's quite awesome really, and such a good way to spend your evening in a constructive and relaxing way. Find them now on yitsalemons.com and show us all how colorful you are. And now back to our scheduled programming. Invincible is the newest animated superhero series from Amazon about a young boy discovering his superhero powers and being trained by his father, who is the strongest superhero on their planet and hides a dark secret. We are introduced to many other superheroes, many of them resembling characters from the DC and Marvel universe, cause it's difficult to be completely original since those cats did everything before. Who tries to figure out what happened to this universe's Justice League, something which will be revealed to you at the end of the first episodes in a very brutal way. Invincible is the comic equivalent of the first season of The Boys, which also features superheroes gone bad. Unfortunately, there's one story plot that is more reminiscent of season 2 of that show and should have been completely moved or at least altered in my opinion. Having an openly third-wave feminist character in your show who is constantly acting like a bitch and a know-it-all is very annoying. Not to say the least that this character, at least in my world, would have been put in her place for acting like she does. Overall though, Invincible is an incredibly well-written and violent animated series that I'm eagerly awaiting the second season of. Check it out if you like superheroes, alternate stories and excellent animation. Smash that. Stillwater is the movie that made Matt Damon realize that people on the other side of the fence are people too. This amazing revelation that any normal person instinctively knows since childhood made me think that this movie would possibly be amazing. In Stillwater, Matt Damon's character Bill Baker travels from the roughneck oil rig south to Marseille in France to visit his daughter, who sits in a French jail for a crime she claims she didn't commit. As new evidence surfaces and his pleas fall upon deaf ears, Baker decides to do his own investigating and attempts his own type of justice. The longer he stays in Marseille, the more he builds a life there, making friends with a young girl and her mother. Stillwater is loosely based on the story of Amanda Knox, who promptly disavowed the film and called it exploitative. Overall, it's a love story about two people coming together and one person trying to figure out something about what matters most. I went into the movie thinking we'd stay in America and have Republicans stand off against Democrats, but nothing like this ever happened. We are treated to the crime city that is Marseille, with its graffiti tags on every building and Moroccan-run sites. Something that would surely put fear into any New York gang member back in the USA. And that was sarcasm. How Mr. Damon realized roughnecks are people too is beyond me, but apparently he found this movie profound enough to learn this from it. All I learned is that some people are so out of touch with reality that they need a movie to figure out we're all in the same boat. Check that. 000 is an Italian crime series about the trafficking of cocaine from the source to the delivery. We are introduced to a family of Americans who own and attempt to ship the product from point A to point B. We see the Mexican cartel and the corrupt cops on their payroll having sparring matches with each other, and we encounter the Italian mob family who wants to collect the product but is dealing with traitors within. These three stories are woven into each other into a compelling story reminiscent, but not as good as, Narcos. The Mexican aspect of the story might be the most interesting due to the sheer amount of brutality involved, whereas the Italian standpoint doesn't reach the heights of any mob films or others of the same ilk. Most of the plot, however, revolves around the American brother and sister who run the shipping and of course get into plenty of trouble as they try to deliver a couple of tons of white to their clients. 000 is an interesting look into the three factions in the drug trade, and it mostly deals with the fact that, even though crime does seem to pay, the cost of doing it can literally cost your life, and that other many innocent bystanders. I was severely intrigued by the final shot of the series, which made me wonder if everything I saw was as it appeared from the start. The realization of this, even though it is expected if you think about it, made the whole thing even darker than it was before. 000 is a good show for people who like these kinds of stories and those who enjoyed Narcos Mexico and, in smaller part, Sicario. Smash that. Romulus is an Italian series about the founders of Rome, Romulus and his brother Remus. Weirdly enough, however, there are no characters named like this in the first season of this show. What we get instead is a couple of tribes battling it out in that area of the world around the 8th century BC. We have Remus, the son of a king, who was falsely accused of murdering his brother and is on the run from those who want to usurp the crown. There's Wiros, a slave who is captured by a small tribe of rejects and stumbles upon Yemos, the only one who is friendly with him. And then there's Ilya, who is entwined with Yemos as he was in love with his brother and the daughter of the king, trying to usurp the others to become the one true king. These three characters attempt to survive in a, to us, strange-looking Bronze Age where not all people were living in cities and many were just dwelling around in the forest, trying to survive. It's baffling that in some scenes these characters almost feel more akin to apes than modern man. At one point I wondered why they didn't invent ladders yet, but that might just be for dramatic purposes. The intrigue and plot is something hard to follow if you don't pay full attention to the characters, something that is necessary from the start since the whole series is acted in archaic Latin. Romulus is an interesting look at the myth of Romulus and Remus, and I'm wondering if their actual Romulus and Remus will still make an appearance in future seasons, especially since the character Ilya, according to the myths, is the mother of the twins Romulus and Remus. If you are uncertain about this 10-episode series, I would suggest you watch Romulus the First King aka Il Primo Re, which tells the story of R&R with a similar style. Overall, Romulus is a very interesting show and worth the watch, and I'm intrigued about what comes next for it. Check that. Invincible is the supposed true-life story of Zish Breitbart, a polished Jewish strongman who gets whisked away to Berlin to perform in a show with Herschel Stein-Snyder, a magician and self-proclaimed oculist at the height of the Weimar Republic when Nazis were rising to power. The first thing that struck me about this movie is the acting. It's quite bad, especially Juko Aola, who is a strong man in real life but clearly not the best actor. But even the supporting cast is not capable of delivering their lines in a convincing manner. Tim Roth, as always, is superb, but he doesn't have enough to lift this movie up. And then, the most annoying part. During the movie I saw some things that didn't make sense to me, and I went investigating on the internet to see if this was real, and, much to chagrin, it is mostly fake. A lot of the movie just did not happen. Zish was dead in 1925, whereas the movie claims he died in 1933. 2 days before Hitler takes power. Zish and Stein-Snyder did meet, but the way they separated was not like the movie at all. Uniforms and other anachronisms turn this movie into something more sinister, using the Jewish people to tell a story in order to resonate certain emotions. Emotions that could have been created by just telling the story like it actually happened. But nah. Let's change it up and not only change history but also pretend that the movie is correct in its depiction. This movie is a total pass for me. Watch a documentary instead, cause this is just lame propaganda and it shouldn't have been. Drop that. The Outsiders is a novel drama about a bunch of greasers in the 1950s who go up against a group of socials. The greasers in question are, for the most part, all brothers who are alone and formed a group because their parents are dead. When a fight between Ponyboy, played by C. Thomas Howell, and Johnny, played by Ralph Macchio, and a bunch of socials gets out of hand, they go on the run from the law. Created by one of the greatest director names in film history, Francis Ford Coppola, and with some very big names like Ralph Karate Kid Macchio, Matt Dillon, Rob Lowe, Patrick Swayze, Tom Cruise, Diane Lane, Tom Waits and Emilio Estevez. Combine this with a compelling story, a rocking soundtrack fitting the times, and a lot of sexy greasy boys crying and running away like little bitches. If you would have put Johnny Depp in this movie, you would have a more mature, film-wise at least, crybaby years before it was actually made. The Outsides is a special film. It feels like it's made by someone with extreme talent who is trying his footing in the art he is trying to make. It's quite the treat in my opinion and does not bore at all. For people fond of the era, Grease, Bad Boys, good music and compelling drama. Smash that. Lady Terminator is one of those 80s movies that tries to jump on the bandwagon of the Terminator and does it in an extremely cheesy way. You will know enough by the tagline of this movie. She mates. Then she terminates. Great, isn't it? Too bad the movie doesn't give a lot of mating, though there's plenty of terminating. Don't get me wrong. The first thing you see is the main character, a sort of evil goddess, doing some mating, after which she terminates her mate, and then, there's some more. But she can't terminate him, which pisses her off. She gets imprisoned but then is fortunate enough to be able to possess a sexy woman, after which she can do some more mating and terminating. This happens a couple of times and it's all fine and PG dandy, but after a while all this mating apparently gets boring to her and she just terminates, like everyone. Lots of explosions, lots of million bullet clips. Good times. Lady Terminator is an amazing cheese fest, and with a little bit more cult would have been one of those movies that's so bad it's good. Unfortunately it's merely so bad it's okay to watch. Check that. Fear Street is the first movie in a horror trilogy that all came out at the same time. The plot is quite simple. There's a happy town where everything goes right and a sad town where everything goes wrong. We have teens in the happy town being dicks to teens in the unhappy town, and a feud goes awry. Oh, and there's a string of murders in the sad town because of course sad towns are crime towns, and this sad town has a whole lot of violent crimes over the course of its history. One would almost think that something is up. We follow around a group of diverse teens doing teenage things while trying to figure out why this serial killer is chasing them. Oh, and it's all based on what Generation Z thinks the 90s looked like, even though it looks more like the 80s at times. But hey, there's a lot of neon. Neon is 80s. At least that's what we think these days. Overall, the first part of Fear Street combines some 80s horror movie tropes with some 90s horror movie tropes and comes out as a quite enjoyable teenage horror flick. It is part of a trilogy, however, so this is not a complete story. Check that. Fear Street 1978 is the second part of the Fear Street trilogy and takes us back to, you guessed it, the late 70s. Like the previous one, which was placed in a faux 90s, this one clearly couldn't be bothered to have 70s cars and all that in the streets, so it all takes place in a summer camp. This instantly harkens back to the Friday the 13th movies, but minus the severity. In this movie we get Sadie Sink play the boyish redhead she played in a couple of Stranger Things seasons, and I immediately wondered if Millie Brown was in the backstage to rudely and jealously interrupt her. Fortunately Millie doesn't appear in this movie, so she is allowed to act her bestest. Unfortunately I just didn't find this part very compelling. It was overly cliché tilde copyright with the summer camp tropes, but a little too light on the heavy nature of a serial killer, or killers, hunting down a couple of kids. But wait, this isn't the last part of it yet. Check that. No, not at all. We will have to travel even further in time to 1666, which, if you hadn't noticed yet, has the number of the beast in it, 603/6. We of course go back to the times of witches and Salem, where people, and mainly women, were prosecuted for being a bit out of the norm. We immediately know the main character, the same from the other movies except the second one, will be the one that is targeted due to asking all young people to do something in the woods with the fruits of their labor, as if medieval kids would all go on some kind of rave in the middle of the night without their parents knowing anything. Not like there are wolves or other beasts or anything. So in this movie we get to see how the good town became the good town and the bad town became the bad one, and we eventually travel back to reach the conclusion overall this is the weakest of the three movies, and it, of course, injects some current day wokeness into it, cause that seems to have to be in everything right now. It's present in the previous movies but is less obvious in my opinion. Or I was more entertained by the previous movies making me not notice it. You tell me, cause I'm not rewatching any of these movies. As it stands, Fear Street is okay as a horror movie, but with so many good horror movies in the past, there are so many more movies to watch before this that do it so much better, sexier and more entertaining. Drop that. So that was that. I have no time for an outro cause I need to color in some of these color boards I got from our sponsor yitsalemons.com, so I'll be busy for a while. Goodbye, till later.